In this knife talk video, we're looking at the Mora Companion in stainless steel. And this is kind of a modern version of a very old Scandinavian fixed blade design called the Puukko. So first of all, you can see that this is made in Sweden, and it's called Mora knife or Mora knife, but usually the company is just called Mora, and it is in stainless steel. This is a Sandvik steel, I believe. But the knife is based off of the traditional Puukko design. And basically it's a knife with a relatively simple handle. The traditional Puukko often has a kind of even simpler than this handle design, just kind of a straight handle with a teardrop shape to it. This does have a little bit of the teardrop shape. It's definitely thicker towards the back than it is in the kind of belly of the handle here, but it's not super traditional, but it definitely takes cues from that Puukko handle design. The blade is a little bit more traditional. So Puukko blades tend to have either a little bit of a clip point like this, the Mora Companion does, or a little bit more of a drop point to them, or a Skinner style blade, depending on what you call it. But it's a really nice blade shape for utility work, like a lot of older traditional fixed blade designs. It works well. There's a reason why people have used it for hundreds of years. Now, one thing you'll notice about this knife that is a little bit different than a lot of other fixed blades is that it looks like the grind is really short. So on a lot of fixed blades, you see either a saber grind on, maybe some American traditional knives like the Bowie knife, or even a full flat grind on knives like that. This is what you call a Scandi, short for Scandinavian grind. And it's really named after this Puukko style knife. But what it is instead of having a main bevel and then a secondary bevel or edge, like a lot of traditional American or other Western style knives, really most knives, it has just the main bevel. So this bevel here, this grind, is both the main grind and the edge. Now on these Mora knives, they do have a slight secondary grind, and really that's just because these are mass produced, and they have to do that to get a nice edge. Speaking of which, these Mora knives come with really great edges. They almost always come shaving sharp, gonna slice through paper really easily, and I've never really had a bad edge from a Mora knife out of the box, or usually they just come in like a plastic bag. Out of the sheath, I guess I could say. So they do come with a nice edge, and like I was saying, they do put a very slight secondary bevel. It's going to be hard for you to even see, I think. But a traditional Scandi or Scandinavian grind is just the main bevel, and it makes both the main bevel and the edge. So unlike a traditional, maybe a Bowie knife or something, there's a main grind and then a secondary grind for the edge, and like most pocket knives, this just has the main bevel. So what it does is it brings the edge to a nice thin edge. The angle of this edge is the angle of the whole grind, which is relatively thin compared to a lot of fixed blades. A lot of fixed blades, especially American style fixed blades, do come with a thicker edge than this knife will. Now, another thing that a lot of people say about Scandi grinds is that they're easier to sharpen in the field. I think that that's mostly hype. Now, I'm not saying that they're more difficult to sharpen, but I don't think that sharpening on this large bevel is that much easier. Now, I do get the theory. So the theory is that because this is a wider bevel, it's going to sit on the stone easier. You're going to be able to feel when it's in the right place on the stone at the right angle than if it was a smaller edge. I think that in theory that sounds really smart, and probably it does help a little bit, but I've used Mora knives and other fixed blades quite a bit, and I think that they're all, as long as it's good steel and an even edge, most fixed blades are relatively easy to sharpen. But just to explain that, because you will hear that a lot in forums and things like that a Scandi grind is easier to sharpen. Again, the reason for that is because if you had a main grind and a secondary grind, the width of the secondary grind is going to be much smaller than the width of this grind. So it's easier to feel when the edge is at the right angle on the stone. So that's another thing about the Scandi grind that a lot of people will recommend it to newer people who are using fixed blades or into knives because of that. Now, one thing that sometimes people will talk about with these Mora knives is that they are rat tail knives. So instead of being full tang, so that it's a full width tang of the knife the whole way through the handle, they do have a rat tail type tang, so it's just a thin piece that goes through the handle, and then the handle is injection molded over that piece. Sometimes people will kind of question the strength of that. Not this exact knife, but another Mora knife with a rat tail style tang. I tried as hard as I could to break it, and I couldn't. Now, I didn't like chop it with an axe, but I stabbed it into trees and bent it and all kinds of stuff, and I was just totally amazed at how strong the Mora knife that I was, beating on was. So I think that as long as you're using this for, a relatively reasonable task for a knife with about a 4 or 4.5 inch blade, it's going to work well. I can't see this breaking outside of, some crazy event happening where you put it between two cinder blocks and hit it with a hammer or something like that in normal use. So I wouldn't worry, if you're thinking about getting a Mora knife. First of all, they're super inexpensive, so, that's something to think about. But I wouldn't worry too much about the strength of it. I think that it's going to hold up under any, real usage that you're going to have for it. So that's the blade, and I've found that this blade holds an edge relatively well. It's certainly not a super steel, but I do like, how this Scandi grind and stainless steel together perform. I have had the non-stainless versions. I like it also, but, the stainless and the non-stainless, I didn't see a huge difference in the performance, so I tend to get the stainless versions. They're also a little bit more available, I think, these stainless versions than the non-stainless. So either way, you're going to be fine. The non-stainless is like any, carbon steel. It's going to rust if you don't, if you leave like salt water on it or something, but either one's going to work well for you. I wouldn't shy away from the stainless because you think it will be less durable or less, edge holding. I think that they'll be comparable, and I've used both work well. Now, excuse me, moving on to the handle here. The handle, like I said, is injection molded. So it's injection molded plastic with kind of an injection molded rubber over it on the grip area. So it does have a nice little guard, which is actually one of the things that is different than a traditional puukko. Traditional puukkos don't have a guard. And that's actually something I have tried to do some research on. Most traditional knife designs, most traditional combat knife designs, so like not a dagger, but most traditional knife designs that I've found don't have guards, which is interesting to me. This is not very specific to this knife, but just something interesting I found. Most traditional fixed blade knives don't have guards. Just something that I'd like, if you have any, thoughts on why that is, feel free to leave them below. Just something that's always been interesting to me. But this one does have a little bit of guard, and it's nice. It's not overdone so that it, gets in the way of using the knife, getting up close so that you can use the knife well or anything like that. It's not too big of a guard. Just nice, you're not going to slip forward too much if you're using this knife for, skinning or anything like that. Has a little bit of an upturn towards the butt, but again, if you've seen my other knife talk videos on a lot of folding knives and things like that, I dislike that. But because this is a big enough handle, it doesn't affect the grip at all. In fact, I actually kind of like it here. It just holds the knife in your hand well. So, really great grip here. This injection molded rubber type stuff feels good. It makes it very tactile. It's not going to just slide out of your hand or anything like that, even when it's wet. So I really like this grip. Super ergonomic because it does have a little bit of that teardrop shape and a little bit of a palm swell. It feels really good in the hand. I've, again, used these knives quite a bit, and you never really get a hot spot with a Mora knife. It's an intelligently designed handle that works really well with, the human hand, or at least my human hand. So really no complaints on this handle. The other thing is, I believe, and I think I did test this a while ago, but I can't remember how well it did. I think that these knives are buoyant. They float. So if you do use this as a fishing knife, which I've used it for that also, that's just something to think about. Finally here, moving on to the sheath. It comes with an injection molded plastic sheath with a couple different kind of interesting things. First of all, you can attach this sheath to a button, so I believe that that's what that's for, or onto other Mora sheaths. So there are some Mora sheaths that have a little kind of button thing here that you could attach this to, so you could have a little system going on. They do make some longer knives, they make some more robust knives, and they also make some axes. So that's something to think about if you want to make a little system for in the woods, like an axe and then this knife. That's certainly an option. I think that these two holes here are from Molly style straps, like what the military uses. You could put this on. It has a nice clip for your belt. I've never had one of these break. I've always, kind of been amazed at that because they don't seem that sturdy, but I've never had one break. I think it is because it's a little bit flexible. Now, they fit well into the sheath. So this one is not reversible. This one, it just goes in this way. Some of the Mora sheaths are reversible, so you can put the knife in either way. But one thing to kind of talk about here that I think not as many people talk about in their reviews, because if you have several Mora knives, you might not use one enough that you realize this, or maybe a lot of people who do reviews haven't extensively used the knives. But I've used Mora knives on camping trips and hunting trips and stuff enough that I realized that there is a little bit of a flaw with this sheath design. So again, it's understandable. It's not something that I'm not going to stop buying Mora knives because of this. But how this knife is held in is this guard basically pops over a little bump in those two runs of plastic that you see there. So you'll probably hear it. So it's there. Yep, that little click. So click. So that's the guard going over a bump in those two little runs of plastic. If you take this knife in and out of the sheath enough, it can wear those little bumps down to the point that if you hold it upside down and shake it, it'll fall out. On a hunting trip last year, I was using this knife for skinning and things like that, and it ended up falling out of the sheath once. I saw it because, again, they come in some bright colors, but not this knife specifically. This one's brand new, but a Mora companion in stainless steel. So they can wear down a little bit to the point that it is less retentive in the sheath. But again, this knife is usually between $10 and $20. I've gotten these for as low as 10, and sometimes they are, more towards 20, but super, super inexpensive. And then finally, there is a hole in the sheath so that it can drain. So one slight downside to this knife, but overall, a really, really great knife. And like I say, when you can get these for $10 to $15, I think if you're into knives, if you use knives, if you go hunting or fishing or camping, or really do anything outdoors, even gardening, you can use this knife for that. There's no reason not to have a Mora knife. You can get them pretty much anywhere that sells knives. I mean, Amazon, you can buy this knife on Amazon Prime if you have it, and for like $11 and have it in 2 days, or they have them. I mean, one of my local gun stores has, is a Mora knife dealer. So they're readily available and super inexpensive and much higher quality and usability than you might expect for the price. So I highly recommend Mora knives of all kinds, but especially the companion. So if you ever need a really inexpensive knife that you're not going to have to worry about using hard, you're going to be able to replace if you need to, but will perform really, well relative to the price for you, great option in the Mora companion. So if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and like it, and if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below. I'm always interested in what you all have to say and try to answer those whenever I can. I have over 100 other videos on traditional knives, fixed blades, and even some modern knives. So I'm sure if you take a look in those other videos, you'll find something you might be interested in. And if you would like to get notifications when I post new videos, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And as always, don't forget to go out and do good.